Hey everyone, welcome to Remap. My name is Jared, and today we're jumping back into the world of Persona with Persona 5 Strikers. Now, Strikers is a unique game in that it's sort of a sequel, but not really. It picks up where Persona 5 ended, but it features a completely separate and different combat system. The regular Persona team at P Studio worked with the developer Omega Force to introduce Dynasty Warriors style gameplay into the Persona series. And for those unaware, Dynasty Warriors style combat is real time hack and slash gameplay where you can be fighting 100 enemies at once, completely different from the turn based combat in Persona 5. But with that background out of the way, as always, before we get started, these are my opinions and mine alone. So, the first thing that I realized when I started playing Strikers was just how biased I was. There's really two separate reviews I can write for this game. One as a fan of the original Persona 5, which is my favorite game of all time between that and Royal. And one as someone who hasn't played P5 and just saw Strikers and said, hey, I'm going to try this out. And I know there are Dynasty Warriors fans out there that definitely fall into the second bucket. So as I go through this review, I'm going to try and keep an open mind, between being a Persona 5 fan and, someone that's saying, what in the world is Persona 5? And I'm going to have two scores at the end to showcase this. But starting off with the visuals, if I'm being honest, I was pretty disappointed by them. I played the game on the PlayStation 5, and I had terrible aliasing on the character models. These are the dark black lines around the character models. If you go into Photoshop and you try to get the background out, and then you just have this, awkward line around a character, for some reason, it was just everywhere on every character. Very, very frustrating to see. It really made the game look dated, which is not something I should be saying about a game that was released in the US in 2021. Okay, even though it was a Japan release in 2020, this should still not look this bad. And the environments, they look more like PlayStation 3 renders. I mean, these look just very, very similar to the original Persona 5 backgrounds, and I mean that game was on the PlayStation 3 when it came out, so the art style is great. It's the nice Persona 5 art style, but that can only take you so far, and I really just wanted the aliasing issue fixed. If that was fixed, I would be a lot kinder on it in this department. But fortunately, the frame rate was at a consistent 60 FPS, and I don't recall a single crash or stutter. Loading times were quick. That at least functioned very well. And the combat did take a while to get used to, and I still don't think I'm completely used to it. Going from turn-based to hack and slash is just about the biggest change you can get. But I do see the allure of some of this gameplay, because in the larger fights where it was just wave after wave and just hordes of enemies coming at me, it was really fun getting into a rhythm, switching between characters, personas, and I could see why people would enjoy this. It unfortunately, though, these moments were few and far between, because most of the time I was just fighting small pockets of enemies over and over again, where you never have the chance to get into a rhythm. It's go up to a person, fight him for 15 seconds, go to the next group of people, fight him for 15 seconds. It was those longer engagements of a minute plus that I started to, get in the groove a little bit. But I will admit, some of these failings may have been due to me playing the game on easy, but the difficulty options really didn't feel balanced to me. I don't know if I'm just bad at the game, but normal offered a fairly strong challenge, and I can't imagine how bad hard was. This really felt like a game where you actually had to, practice and grind up certain stats to progress farther on normal or hard difficulties. And it got to a point where I just wanted to see the story, so I just bumped it down to easy and blew through it, which easy was way too easy. I do wish there was a, easy to normal mode, or maybe 5 difficulty options instead of 3, to give me a little bit of a challenge, but I had no interest in grinding up stats. And the story is the big area where there are 2 distinct, viewpoints. And I'm going to keep this spoiler free, but to me at least, Persona 5 Strikers has the assumption that you played Persona 5. There's not a recap of the events of Persona 5, but Strikers picks up with the same characters only a few months after the events of the first game. And this made it an awesome, natural feeling experience for me. But if you haven't played P5, you are going to have absolutely no idea what is going on. You know, the characters, they reference the events of the past game, but unless you've played it, you know, they don't give enough information for you to piece together all of the events. You'll get bits and pieces and you'll, form some opinions, but if you haven't played Persona 5, you're going to have no clue what's going on. It's sort of like watching Avengers Endgame as your first Marvel movie. Like, there is a story, there are characters, you're going to see a little bit of development, you'll learn about some things, but you're going to miss all the development, all the context, all the details, and it is not going to be nearly as good of an experience if you've just seen 5 to 10 of the previous Marvel movies, not even all 20. And the problem with this whole thing is Persona 5 is such a large, complex game that I don't know how they would explain it in a concise manner. Back to that Marvel analogy, it's sort of like needing to watch all 20 MCU movies before Endgame. Like, if you haven't watched all 20, a 15-minute recap is not going to give you enough detail. But as someone who enjoyed Persona 5 very much, I had a fun time with the Striker story. Not because it was deep and complex. It actually has the exact same themes as Persona 5. But it just works. I mean, it's a feel-good game where the characters band together to fight the bad guys, make the world a better place, and stand up for themselves. And sometimes, the simplest themes can be the most impactful. You don't have to have a deeply, nuanced 20 different layers. Oh, how is this character? No, sometimes it's, hey, stand up for yourself, fight back against evil, and you can just have a great time. And these characters were all brought to life with some excellent voice acting that makes Strikers feel like a legitimate extension of the Persona 5 story. Because, again, I experienced these characters' growth in Persona 5. So Strikers didn't have to spend all this time redeveloping the characters. They could just plop me right in the story and run with it. Now, if you watched my Persona 5 Royal review, you would know how I feel about the Persona 5 soundtrack. It is, in my opinion, the greatest soundtrack in gaming. So it's safe to say that my expectations were pretty high for Strikers. And while Strikers is a much shorter game, it took me about 26 hours, which is a quarter of the length of Persona 5, and reuses plenty of tracks from 5 and remixes a handful of them, the highs that Strikers hits in the soundtrack department are just as awesome as I hoped. Axe to Grind and You Are Stronger have earned a seat at the table, and I consider them part of the overall Persona 5 soundtrack between the base game, Royal, and Strikers. But at the end of the day, it's just such a niche game. Because if you're not a Persona 5 fan, I cannot recommend Strikers. Listening to my review, the only strong endorsements I have are, the characters, the story, the soundtrack. Well, if you haven't played Persona 5, all you're going to get is some music, okay? And you can just look up the music on Spotify or Apple Music. You don't need to buy the game to just get the music. So my score for people that haven't played Persona 5 it's a D. It's a strong D. There's just nothing here for you. But Strikers is just lacking visually. It's got combat that takes some getting used to. And again, if you haven't played Persona 5, the story is completely nonsensical. But for people that have played and love Persona 5, Strikers, I'm going to give it a B-. It's still a poor graphical performance. with combat I just feel okay about, but the story and the characters drag it across the finish line and make it worth a playthrough. But that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. You've been listening to Remap, the gaming podcast. My name is Jared, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.